Coming up, the Norwegian Sun makes its final port call in Indonesia, and I spend the day on a shore excursion in Semerang, experiencing a range of different cultures. And then after that, it's a case of endurance as we have 2 rough days at sea, crossing the South China Sea. Good morning from Semerang in Java, Indonesia. It is day 4 of the cruise, and this is our last port in Indonesia. After that we have a couple of sea days before getting to Vietnam. So I'm not sure if it continued to rain overnight, but basically the balcony is still completely wet. The drain there is still full of water. So hopefully it's going to stay dry, and hopefully all of that is going to be dried up by the time I get back from my shore excursion. As usual, it still feels pretty hot even though it's first thing in the morning. It's currently 28 degrees and feeling very humid. As my shore excursion was a little bit later this morning, I had time for a leisurely breakfast. So I tried out the alternative buffet, which is in the Brazilian restaurant on the port side of the ship, on the opposite side to the Garden Cafe buffet. It's essentially used as an overflow buffet for breakfast and lunch, and it is so much more peaceful and tranquil than the Garden Cafe, which is crazy busy. Today's shore excursion is the highlights of Semerang, and it's a 6-hour excursion which is basically promising to give me an overview of the city. Now that came in at a cost of €124 or about 145 US dollars, and as I mentioned before, I did purchase the More at Sea, so I had a $50 reduction on that. Now the cruise ship is docked today in the commercial container port in Semerang, so really the only way that you can actually leave the port seems to be by either a shore excursion, or alternatively there was actually a taxi stand there. I'm not sure it's something I'd be comfortable doing because I have no idea about Semerang. So if you're like me and you've never heard of Semerang, here's a few quick facts. Basically, it's on the Indonesian island of Java, and it's the 6th largest city in Indonesia. The city of Semerang itself has a population of about 1.7 million, but the wider metropolitan area apparently has a population of about 6 million. So in terms of Indonesian cities, I have to say I have probably only ever heard of Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia and is also on Java. Now, first impressions as we headed out of the port are probably reflective of the image that I had in my mind of a large Indonesian urban area. Undoubtedly, it's vastly different to the experience on Bali or on Lombok of the past few days. We passed through diverse areas from what you might almost describe as being shanty towns to much more developed and wealthier looking neighbourhoods. So very much significant contrasts here.
The first the first tourist attraction, so we call it the Poo Kong Temple.
So the first stop on the tour was the Poo Kong Temple, and that's the oldest Chinese temple in Semerang. And today it accommodates a number of temples which cater to both Chinese and Javanese religions. The overall complex extends to over 3 hectares, and it has 5 different temples, and they're in various architectural styles. They also, in addition to functioning as actual places of worship for various religions, they also serve as being a pretty major tourist destination in Semerang. Now, our tour guide was pretty keen to impart huge amounts of information, and he was hooked up with a microphone to try and make it easier, but his English pronunciation was sometimes a little bit difficult to grasp, so it was really just nicer to wander around and just soak up the whole experience and the atmosphere. Now, one tip if you're visiting here: the standard in entering a temple is that you do need to remove your footwear. So just to be prepared, and if you intend going into the temple, perhaps decide to wear footwear that you have socks, or bring socks just to temporarily walk inside. were a number of market stalls and food stalls at the exit from the temple, but there was very little time to sample those or experience that area at all, so don't bank on doing any shopping. As we once again ventured into the crazy traffic of Semerang, we made our way to the next stop, which was the Grand Mosque of Central Java. En route, we passed through some of the core area of the city centre, and there was a huge range of architectural styles ranging from modern Western style high-rise buildings to much older ornate buildings which were influenced by Dutch heritage.
Lawang Sewu. So ladies and gentlemen, so can you prepare of your phone mobile? Can you prepare of the smartphone to take a picture when the Dutch building is on the right side? So this the Dutch building is called Lawang Sewu. So Lawang Sewu, Lawang it means door, Sewu is 1,000. So Lawang Sewu is 1,000 doors.
The Grand Mosque of Central Java was through an elaborate arched entryway. Now the Grand Mosque complex is pretty extensive. It occupies about 10 hectares and it accommodates a range of buildings which collectively are considered to be the prime place of worship for Muslims on Java. At capacity, it can actually accommodate an amazing 15,000 people during times of worship. Now, relative to a lot of other buildings in Semerang, the Grand Mosque is practically new. It had its dedication ceremony just in 2006. So our visit was confined to the exterior grounds only, and our guide explained that the majority of the building's interiors are only accessible to those in the Muslim faith as part of their worship. The third and final stop on the excursion was in Semerang Old Town, which is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has a diverse range of architectural styles. There we were joined by two other coaches who were also doing the same shore excursion, and we were all led to an exhibition space where there were refreshments provided while there was a performance of traditional dance and song from some young entertainers. Musical entertainment was from a youth orchestra, and at first there was a traditional Indonesian song, and that was followed by a rendition of Fly Me to the Moon. So that was a slightly unusual musical combination. Now, whilst at this stop, there was also an opportunity to explore the third place of worship of the day, and this time it was a Protestant church called the Blinduk Church. That was built in 1753, and we had an opportunity to explore the interior. After that, we were also encouraged to visit Semerang Hub, which was also in the vicinity, and that's a type of craft space where there were various stall holders who were mostly selling clothing, textiles, that kind of thing. drive back to the ship later in the afternoon seemed to coincide with rush hour traffic in Semerang, so it took about 40 minutes in total. Arriving back at 4 p.m, there was still plenty of time to check out the market stalls that had been set up for the day right by the ship. Now, most traders there actually accepted both Indonesian currency as well as US dollars. Given that all that the eye can see is pretty much industrial containers all over, sail away definitely was not something that could be considered too scenic. So in actual fact, experiencing sail away from my balcony on the opposite side of the ship and watching the tugboats in action was far more pleasant than sitting watching the container port. Soon time to leave our last port in Indonesia. Tugboats are getting into place. Due to leave Semerang in 20 minutes, but I'd say we're going to leave early. We were scheduled to leave at about 6 p.m, but as seems to be becoming the norm on this cruise, we actually pushed off a little bit earlier than that. So definitely nobody is taking the chance on being late back to the ship. Dinner for me this evening was something that I had really been looking forward to. It was in La Cucina, so that's the Italian specialty restaurant. It's the oddly shaped one, a hard to find location on deck 5. If you've seen my last vlog, which had the mini ship tour on it. Now, although Italian is one of my favourite cuisines, I was a little bit disappointed. I think at best my rating of this would be just okay, particularly the main course was quite on the disappointing side. Tonight's offering in the theatre was a magician illusionist type act. He was reasonably entertaining and also had good comedy value. Later on around the ship, it centred mostly on the Bliss Lounge, where one of the onboard bands were keeping the crowd entertained for a NABA party night. Mamma mia, now I really know, Mama, I should never let you go. It's day 5, it's the first of 2 sea days, and we have increasingly unsettled seas to contend with, and the sick bags have come out. Now, I decided to try something different this morning, and that was to experience an art class on board. It came in at a cost of $35, and that generally covered the materials of the class, although I used the term loosely about it being a class. It was basically led by one of the cruise activity staff who admitted he didn't really know much about art than the rest of us. So it was enjoyable and it was a fun experience, even if my finished product is a long way from what it was intended to actually look like. For lunch, I think I've settled on sea day lunches in the main dining room being the most enjoyable option on board, much better than going to the buffet. I'm happy to say that it's now a case of 3 out of 3 as regards getting a window table. And that's actually something that as a solo cruiser I typically tend to find I don't get very often on other cruise lines. Now, despite the increasingly rough seas, a brisk walk on the promenade deck was still a pleasant experience later in the afternoon. And I was quite amazed to see that even with an almost gale force wind whipping up on the pool deck, it was still quite busy, with also a small number of guests enthusiastically joining in a line dancing class. Later, the entertainment offering in the theatre was a male vocalist. I believe his name was Ruben Laurent, and he gave a little bit of his life story in the course of his performance. So he seems to be really popular in his home country, which is the Philippines, but he is now predominantly a cruise ship entertainer as a guest act on board various cruises. Although reasonably talented, I felt he was trying a little bit too hard to appeal to a Western audience, so didn't really come across as being particularly authentic in his performance.
Al ricordarci che la terra stella nella mia preghiera quanta felice. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace. Give us faith, so we'll be saved. This is the day. See it sparkle and shine, when all I've been for becomes mine.
Good morning from the South China Sea. The sea is pretty lively, has been overnight. The sick bags have been out yesterday and today. This is the second of 2 sea days as we make our way from Indonesia to Vietnam. There's a fair amount of creaking going on. To be expected, I suppose, from an older ship. But still, everything's going okay, so no sickness on my part. According to our position on the map this morning, I think we actually crossed the equator overnight, but unfortunately NCL doesn't seem to be doing anything to commemorate that. A lot of cruise lines do actually have a whole ceremony around that to mark the occasion, and if you want to see that, check out my Trans-Pacific vlog series where one of the episodes covers that. Despite the sea conditions, it was still possible to enjoy breakfast on the outer deck at the back of the ship, rather than in going to experience the crazy busy garden cafe buffet. Later in the morning there was a questions and answers session. Now, on most cruise ships this tends to also include the captain, but in this instance there was no sign of the captain. It was the head chef, the hotel manager and the senior engineer of the ship. Other than the captain's midday navigational announcements, he hasn't actually been seen or heard around the ship at all. As sea days on a cruise are often defined by periods of relaxation, only punctuated by meal times, it was time for another sea day lunch in the dining room. Although I only wanted a light lunch, I could do that by basically choosing the starters rather than main courses from the menu. And again, it was so much of a nicer experience than that buffet, which I so much dislike. Later in the evening, the theatre offering was the ventriloquist. It was actually the ventriloquist that had performed on the first night, so I'm pleased to say that he was actually a whole lot funnier and his act was so much better than that first night. And returning to the theme of food again, you see, I did say sea days are punctuated by food, and basically dinner this evening was in the main dining room. Now, in comparison to the Italian specialty restaurant from 2 nights ago, I felt that the offering in the main dining room this evening was just so far superior, so quite surprising. Later, after enjoying watching another heat of the karaoke sessions, it was time for an early night in preparation for what lies ahead tomorrow. Coming up next time, the Norwegian Sun arrives in Vietnam and I experience Ho Chi Minh City for the first time. So stay tuned and I'll bring you all the details of that shore excursion. For now, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please do consider hitting the like button. And if you'd like to stay tuned or stay up to date on when the next vlog comes out in this series or on any other future cruises, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It would be really appreciated. Bye for now.